Podcast 237, an interdisciplinary exploration of Psalm 23, 1-7, ISBN 979-889-443-4452. Welcome back to Sacred Texts Unveiled. I am your host, Dr. William Anderson Gittins, D.D., from the beautiful island of Barbados. And today, we are diving into one of the most beloved and timeless passages in the Hebrew Bible, Psalm 23. You've probably heard it quoted many times, whether at a wedding, funeral, or during a moment of personal reflection. But what makes this psalm so powerful? Why do people from all walks of life and every culture turn to these 7 verses for comfort, strength, and hope? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. Psalm 23, not just as a spiritual comfort, but as a profound piece of theological, literary, and historical wisdom. We'll be looking at its themes of divine care, provision, and protection through a scholarly lens, touching on literary structure, theological reflections, and even its pedagogical implications for modern-day faith education. Introduction to Psalm 23. Psalm 23 is often referred to as the Shepherd's Psalm, and its opening line alone, I quote, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," end quote, has comforted countless individuals throughout history. It's a psalm that speaks to trust, care, and a deep personal relationship with God. Traditionally attributed to King David, this psalm draws upon imagery that would have been familiar to ancient Israelites and agriculture and shepherding. But the real question is, what does this metaphor of the shepherd really mean, both for the people of the past and for us today? Right. The shepherd metaphor is key to understanding the psalm. In the ancient Near East, the shepherd's role was to guide, protect, and provide for the flock. Craig, 1983, explains that the shepherd's responsibility wasn't just about physical care, but about ensuring the well-being of the sheep on every level, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. In the case of Psalm 23, this metaphor extends to show God's intimate relationship with humanity. He doesn't just provide for our basic needs, but leads us to peace and restoration. Thematic analysis, divine guidance, and provision. Let's dig into the key theological themes in Psalm 23. At the heart of it is divine guidance and provision. In verse 2, it says, "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters." These pastoral images aren't just about literal sheep. They symbolize peace, rest, and spiritual fulfillment. Exactly. McCann, 1996, elaborates on this when he says the shepherd's role goes beyond physical sustenance. God doesn't just feed us, He restores our souls. Think about that. Restores my soul isn't a deep renewal of one's spiritual and emotional health. This is what sets this psalm apart. It offers more than just comfort in times of distress. It offers a total restoration. The imagery of green pastures and still waters offers a kind of spiritual tranquility that many people long for in a chaotic world. And this idea of divine provision is not just about material things. When the psalmist says, I quote, I shall not want, end quote. It's affirming that God's provision meets both our material and spiritual needs, restoration and righteousness. Now we move into a key verse. I quote, "He restores my soul, he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake," end quote. Psalm 23:3. This verse is not just about personal well-being, it's about alignment with God's will. It emphasizes the need for spiritual renewal that leads us toward righteousness. And this ties into divinity education. My role as Doctor of Divinity is Gittins 2025 points out that the path of righteousness is not just about moral behavior, but about following God's guidance towards spiritual and ethical growth. This is the role of a shepherd, guiding the flock not just to safety, but to a life that reflects divine values. McCain 1996 argues that it's through this guidance that we're able to remain in right relationship with God, and that's a central theme throughout the entire psalm. It's also about protection. As David says, "Walking," I quote, "through the valley of the shadow of death," end quote, verse 4, reflects life's darkest moments. But the psalmist affirms that there is no need to fear because God's presence ensures safety. The rod and staff that are mentioned symbolize divine protection and guidance, both preventing harm and keeping us on the right path. Comfort in adversity. One of the most powerful images in Psalm 23 is in verse 4, where the psalmist says, I quote, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil," end quote. The, I quote, "valley of the shadow of death," end quote, isn't just about literal death. It's about the fears, trials, and suffering that everyone experiences in life. Exactly, and as Tate 1990 points out, the darkest valley represents any distressing or dangerous situation, whether that's physical, emotional, or spiritual. But there's confidence in God's protection that reassures the believer. Even in the darkest times, God's presence doesn't just comfort, it transforms our fear into trust. The rod and staff represent God's authority and his care, and they are a source of comfort. That's right. This comfort between comfort and divine care in the face of adversity speaks to the emotional resilience that the psalm fosters. It offers the promise of God's presence when everything else is uncertain, assurance of goodness and eternal security. The final verse of the psalm, I quote, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever," end quote. Psalm 23:6 really sums up the psalm's broader message. Ultimate security in God's care is not just about God's protection in the present, but the unshakable hope of eternal fellowship with God. Craig 1983 beautifully explains that this promise is both a present reality and a future hope. It assures the believer that God's goodness and mercy will follow us throughout our life, and that there is an eternal secure place in God's presence. This is not just a fleeting comfort, it's an eternal truth that brings lasting peace. Literary and textual structure. Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to appreciate the literary structure of Psalm 23. The simplicity of its language is what makes it so accessible, yet the theological depth is profound. It opens with a declaration of God's provision, moves through the comfort of divine protection during trials, and ends with an unshakable hope of eternal communication with God. And Adam McCann, 1996, argues that this structure mirrors the believer's spiritual journey, the rhythm from provision to protection, and finally to the promise of eternal peace, offers a framework that resonates with our own life experiences, moving from peace through trials and back to peace in God's presence. Conclusion. Bringing it all together. Psalm 23 is not just a comforting passage, it's a profound theological text. Through its imagery of the shepherd, divine guidance, and eternal security, it paints a picture of a God who is intimately involved in every aspect of our lives. This psalm is not only a personal prayer of trust and hope, but also a key text for understanding the relationship between God and humanity. And it's through the interdisciplinary exploration of Psalm 23, whether through literary, theological, or psychological lenses, that we truly see its riches. This psalm continues to offer comfort, challenge, and insight, making it as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. In closing, I am Dr. William Anderson Gittins, D.D., your host, and I hope you enjoyed today's study of Psalm 23, which is also captured and framed in e-publication 405 that is located within the academic boundaries of academia.edu. If you found this discussion insightful, be sure to subscribe to www.buzzsprout.com achievements and join us next time for more deep dives into sacred texts. Until then, remember, I quote, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," end quote. Take care, everyone, and keep reflecting on the wisdom of the Psalms. See you next time. God bless.